The blood on her hands wasn't hers. The giant dog sprawled across her clinic floor shouldn't have survived. And the men surrounding her facility with military precision shouldn't exist in rural Pennsylvania. But they did. The shepherd's breathing rattled in the pre-dawn silence of Keira's clinic, each exhale fogging the stainless steel of the surgical table. Her hands, steady from years of emergency rescues, tremored now as she examined the precision of the bullet graze along the dog's flank. This wasn't a hunting accident. This was a capture attempt. She'd been running the no-name rural clinic for 18 months, ever since she'd fled the wreckage of her old life. No social media. No credit cards. Cash transactions and a post office box. The kind of anonymity that cost everything but promised safety from men who used power like a weapon. Her fingers found the ridge beneath the dog's thick coat, a surgical scar, recent, professional. She'd seen tracking chips before. This wasn't that. This was something embedded deep, something valuable enough that someone had tried to steal the entire animal rather than risk extraction. The dog's amber eyes fixed on her, intelligent and assessing in a way that made her skin prickle. Military trained. Asset trained. Vory trained. God, what have you gotten me into? She whispered. The clinic's motion sensors chimed. Then chimed again. For vehicles. 6. Blocking every exit road from her property. Keira's throat closed. She grabbed the medical bag. She'd prepared for emergencies exactly like this. The kind where powerful men came to collect what they believed they owned. But when she reached the back door, 2 men in tactical clothing were already there, silent and immovable. Miss Doyle. The voice came from behind her, accented, almost polite. Mr. Makarov requests your presence.
She spun.
The man in her clinic doorway wore an expensive suit that looked wrong against the backdrop of stainless steel and antiseptic. His eyes swept the space, landing on the sedated shepherd with something like relief, then back to her with calculation. I don't know any. You know his dog. The man gestured, and she was flanked immediately, hands gripping her arms with professional restraint. That is sufficient. They moved her through the morning mist like an extraction team, efficient and silent. The lead SUV's interior smelled of leather and gun oil. Keira's mind raced through everything she knew about the Russian Vory, the thieves-in-law who operated beyond government, beyond mercy, with codes older than borders. The compound materialized after 40 minutes of rural highways turning to private roads, a fortress disguised as an estate, all stone walls and strategic sightlines. She was escorted through hallways that whispered old money and older violence, past men who watched her with the empty eyes of those who'd seen too much death to care about one more. They stopped before heavy double doors. The man in the suit knocked once, then opened them, gesturing her inside. The office was warmer than she expected, dark wood, amber lighting, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a forest that probably hid bodies. Behind an antique desk sat a figure silhouetted against the morning light. He rose. The movement was deliberate, almost ritualistic. Twin crutches materialized in his hands, custom, matte black, engineered for someone who'd turned a liability into a weapon of presence. He was younger than the legends suggested, perhaps 40, with a kind of severe handsomeness that came from Slavic bone structure and years of controlled violence. Dark eyes that missed nothing. A body that suggested he'd been formidable before whatever injury had claimed his legs. But it was the way he moved, measured, purposeful, each step a statement of power that had nothing to do with physical wholeness, that froze Keira in place. He crossed half the distance between them before stopping, head tilted slightly, studying her the way she'd studied the dog's wound.
Cataloging.
Assessing. Deciding her value. Miss Doyle. His English carried Moscow winters and iron discipline. Keira Nora Doyle. Born Boston, degree in veterinary medicine from Cornell, previous employment at the Massachusetts SPCA until your very public termination 18 months ago. He paused, letting each detail land like a blade. The lawsuit filed by your former employer's board chairman, Marcus Thornhill, after you refused his advances and threatened to expose his embezzlement scheme. The settlement that cost you everything. The disappearance into rural Pennsylvania under a name that is, I must say, barely adequate for someone attempting to vanish. Kira's blood turned to ice. No one knew. No one was supposed to know. Nikolai took another step forward, and she saw it then. The flash of pain he controlled so absolutely it became almost invisible. The crutches weren't a weakness. They were proof of survival. Tell me, Keira Doyle. His voice dropped to something quieter, more dangerous. Did you think a simple black apron and a rural clinic could hide you forever? Or did you simply hope that men like Marcus Thornhill were the worst the world had to offer? His smile was a razor wrapped in winter. Let me assure you, they are not. Kira's hands curled into fists at her sides, nails biting into her palms hard enough to ground her spiraling thoughts. The rage came first, hot and familiar, the same fury that had consumed her when Marcus Thornhill had smiled across that conference table and destroyed her career with 3 sentences and a forged signature. You have no right. I have every right. Nikolai's interruption was surgical, precise. He shifted his weight slightly, the crutches absorbing the movement with engineered silence. You entered my world the moment you opened Krisha's cage at the county intake facility yesterday morning. The moment you sedated him. The moment you discovered what lies beneath his skin. I didn't know. Ignorance is not innocence, Miss Doyle. It is simply uninformed culpability. He moved to the side, revealing the window behind him. Dawn was breaking over the forest, painting the sky in shades of blood and ash. Krisha is not a pet. He is not a rescue. He is a $30 million intelligence asset with a microchip embedded in his chest cavity that contains encrypted financial records capable of destabilizing 3 governments and exposing the operational networks of 7 competing organizations. The number hit her like a physical blow. 30 million. She'd been stroking a $30 million weapon while humming to calm his breathing. Someone tried to take him, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The wound was meant to incapacitate, not kill. They wanted him alive. Very good. Nikolai's approval felt like poison. Now tell me who. How the hell would I know? I found him bleeding in a transport cage with a falsified intake form. I did what I always do. I tried to save him. And that compassion, Miss Doyle, is precisely why you're here. He gestured toward a leather chair positioned in front of his desk, an invitation that felt like a command. Sit. I'd rather stand. It was not a request. Kira sat. The leather was buttersoft, expensive, the kind of thing she'd never be able to afford again thanks to men exactly like the one standing before her. Her jaw ached from clenching. Nikolai moved behind his desk with that measured grace, lowering himself into his chair with controlled precision. The crutches disappeared somewhere beneath the desk's edge, and for a moment, he looked like any other powerful executive. Except for the eyes. Those eyes had watched people die and made peace with it long ago. Krisha was attacked 3 nights ago during transport between secure locations, he began, steepling his fingers. The team was eliminated. Professional work. The dog was taken, wounded in a manner that suggests the attacker understood his value but underestimated his training. Krisha killed 2 men and escaped. He was recovered by animal control 12 hours later, where you encountered him. You're telling me a dog killed 2 people? Krisha is not simply a dog, Miss Doyle. He is Caucasian Shepherd breeding stock, trained from 6 weeks old in both protection and intelligence work. He has been with me for 4 years. He knows 60 commands in 3 languages. He can identify threats by scent, by behavior patterns, by microexpressions most humans miss entirely. Nikolai leaned forward slightly. And he trusts exactly 3 people in this world. I am one. My head of security is another. The 3rd died in the attack. Kira's mind raced. You want me to examine him? To find evidence of who did this? I want you to read him. Nikolai pulled a folder from his desk drawer, sliding it across the polished surface toward her. You have a gift, Miss Doyle. A rare ability to interpret animal behavior with accuracy that borders on preternatural. Your published research on trauma recognition in rescue animals was impressive. Your work identifying abuse patterns through behavioral analysis led to 17 convictions before Marcus Thornhill decided you were more useful silent than employed. She didn't touch the folder. Didn't want to know what else he'd uncovered about her life. The men who attacked Krisha knew our route. They knew our protocol. They knew enough to bypass 3 layers of security and execute a professional extraction. His voice dropped, taking on an edge that raised the hair on her arms. This was an internal breach. Someone in my organization betrayed me. Someone Krisha knows. You want me to figure out who he recognizes. I want you to tell me who makes him uncomfortable, who triggers defensive responses, who carries the scent memory of that night. Nikolai's fingers drummed once against the desk, the only tell of impatience she'd seen. You will stay here. You will work with Krisha daily. You will observe my men, my associates, everyone who has access to this compound. And you will identify the traitor. And if I refuse? The silence stretched between them like a blade. Marcus Thornhill's legal team is very thorough, Nikolai said finally, his tone almost conversational. But not as thorough as mine. I have the original documents you collected, the proof of his embezzlement, the recorded conversations, the pattern of harassment spanning 7 employees over 9 years. He paused. I also have evidence of 3 additional cases, far worse than yours, that he paid substantial sums to bury. Women who lost more than their careers. Kira's breath caught. She'd suspected, had known, deep down, that she wasn't the first. But hearing it confirmed, you want to trade information for my cooperation?
No.
Nikolai's smile was winter itself. I want you to understand that you have 2 choices. Work for me, willingly, and when this is finished, I will hand you everything you need to destroy Marcus Thornhill so completely he will die in prison. Or refuse, and I will return you to your clinic, where you will spend the rest of your life hiding from shadows while Thornhill continues to ruin women who remind him of his own inadequacy. That's not a choice. That's extortion. That is leverage, Miss Doyle. Something you understand intimately, I think. She wanted to scream, to flip his antique desk and tell him exactly what she thought of powerful men who manipulated the vulnerable. But beneath the rage, underneath the powerlessness, was something else. Something darker. The image of Krisha's amber eyes. The way he'd leaned into her touch despite the pain. The trust of a creature who'd been weaponized and betrayed. How long, she asked. As long as necessary.
Days.
Perhaps weeks. I want it in writing. Everything about Thornhill. Proof that you'll deliver. You'll have it within the hour. Kira stood, her legs surprisingly steady. And the dog stays with me.
Full-time.
If I'm reading his behavior, I need consistent access. Nikolai rose as well, reaching for the crutches with practiced ease. Krisha will be moved to the suite adjacent to yours. You'll find everything you need has already been arranged. You are that certain, I'd agree? He crossed to the door, moving past her close enough that she caught his scent, expensive cologne underlaid with something sharp. Gun oil, maybe. Or blood. Miss Doyle, he said, turning to face her one last time. I am certain of very few things in this world. But I am always certain of what people need most. And you need vengeance far more than you need freedom. The door opened before she could respond, revealing the same suited man who'd collected her from the clinic. Dmitri will show you to your quarters. We begin tomorrow at dawn. Kira walked through the door on legs that felt disconnected from her body, fury and helplessness warring in her chest. Behind her, she heard Nikolai return to his desk, the soft click of his crutches against hardwood, a rhythm that would haunt her dreams. She'd come here to save a dog. Instead, she'd become exactly what she'd spent 18 months running from. Someone else's asset. The suite was obscene. That was Kira's first coherent thought as Dmitri closed the door behind her, leaving her alone in what could only be described as luxury weaponized against good sense. Cream silk curtains framed windows that overlooked manicured grounds stretching toward the forest. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, its linens probably worth more than her entire clinic's equipment budget. Fresh flowers, peonies, her favorite, which made her skin crawl, sat in a crystal vase on an antique writing desk. Someone had done research. Deep research. Her clothes from the clinic were already hanging in the walk-in closet, looking pathetic next to garments she definitely hadn't owned before. Cashmere sweaters. Tailored pants. Dresses in jewel tones that would actually fit her. She touched a sleeve and jerked her hand back as if burned. A door she had noticed opened, and Krisha padded through. The massive Caucasian shepherd moved with careful precision, favoring his injured side but alert, assessing. His amber eyes found her immediately, and something in her chest loosened. Here, at least, was honesty. The dog had no agenda beyond survival and instinct. "Hey, big guy," she murmured, dropping to her knees. "How are you feeling?" Krisha approached slowly, scent-checking her extended hand before pressing his enormous head against her shoulder. The trust in that gesture, the vulnerability, made her throat tight. She'd sedated him, cut into him, and he still chose connection over caution. "We're both prisoners now," she whispered into his fur. "Aren't we?" The dog's tail swished once. Not agreement. Just presence. She spent an hour examining him properly, checking his sutures, assessing his pain responses, cataloging every flinch and tension. The wound was healing well. Her work had been good despite the circumstances. But it was his behavior that fascinated her. Krisha was hypervigilant, tracking sounds beyond her hearing range, positioning himself between her and the door with automatic precision. He'd been trained to protect.
Not her, specifically.
Just whoever held his current loyalty. The realization settled like lead in her stomach. This dog didn't choose his allegiances. They were programmed into him through repetition and reward until instinct and training became indistinguishable. Just like Nikolai was trying to do with her. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. A woman entered without waiting for permission. Late 50s, steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, wearing a crisp black dress that screamed head housekeeper. "Dinner is in 1 hour, Miss Doyle. Mr. Makarov expects you in the small dining room." Her English carried a thick Russian accent. "I am Svetlana. You need anything, you ask me." "I'm not hungry. Mr. Makarov expects you," Svetlana repeated, as if Kira simply hadn't understood the first time. Her eyes moved to Krisha, and something softened.
"Good.
The beast looks better." He was missed. Before Kira could respond, the woman was gone. The small dining room turned out to be twice the size of Kira's entire apartment back in Boston. Nikolai was already seated when she arrived, his crutches propped against the wall within easy reach. He'd changed into a black sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and made his dark eyes even more unreadable. "You came," he observed. "You didn't give me a choice." Kira took the seat across from him, maintaining eye contact despite every instinct screaming to look away. Just like everything else. "There is always choice, Miss Doyle. You simply find your options limited." He gestured, and a server appeared, pouring wine she didn't want into crystal she'd never use. "How is Krisha?" "Healing. The sutures are clean. No infection. He's mobile but cautious." She paused, weighing her words. "He's trained to protect whoever feeds him, aren't you? That's why he trusts me. I'm just the current handler. Krisha is trained to survive. Trust is separate." Nikolai lifted his wine glass, studying her through the garnet liquid. "He chose to stay with you when Dmitri entered your suite earlier. He could have left. He didn't." Kira's pulse jumped. She hadn't realized they were being monitored that closely. "The cameras are for security," Nikolai continued, reading her expression with unnerving accuracy. "Not surveillance. There's a difference." "Is there?" "In my world, always." The first course arrived, some kind of soup that smelled incredible and tasted like ash in her mouth. She ate mechanically, aware of Nikolai watching her with that same clinical assessment he'd used in his office. Cataloging. Deciding her value. "You're angry," he said finally. "I'm realistic. Anger and realism are not mutually exclusive." He set down his spoon with precise control. "You believe I've manipulated you. That I've taken your choices and replaced them with my agenda. Haven't you?" "Yes." The admission was startling in its simplicity. But I have also given you what you wanted most. Purpose. Direction. The tools to destroy the man who took everything from you. He leaned back slightly, and she saw it. The micro-expression of pain he controlled so absolutely it was almost invisible. You've spent 18 months in exile, Miss Doyle.
Hiding.
Surviving. Telling yourself that anonymity was safety. But you're dying in that isolation. Slowly. Quietly. And you know it. The words hit too close to truths she'd buried deep. You don't know anything about me. I know you stayed late at the SPCA every night for 2 years, sleeping in your office because your apartment felt too empty. I know you adopted 3 dogs you couldn't afford because you needed something to need you back. I know Marcus Thornhill understood your compassion and used it as a pressure point until you broke. His voice was merciless. And I know you hate yourself for breaking. Kira's hands shook. She pressed them flat against the table, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. Why? The words scraped out. Why tell me this? Why not just use the leverage and leave me in the dark? Nikolai's expression shifted, something almost like respect flickering across his features. Because I need you functional, not resentful. I need your skills sharp, your observations accurate. And you cannot give me that if you spend every moment calculating escape routes and plotting my demise. He paused. Also, because despite what you believe, I do not enjoy cruelty for its own sake. Necessary violence, yes. Strategic manipulation, certainly. But making you suffer serves no purpose. How comforting. It should be. He reached for his crutches, rising with that deliberate grace. Tomorrow, you'll meet my senior staff. Krisha will accompany you. Watch him. Watch them. Tell me what you see. Kira stood as well, pride demanding she not remain seated while he towered above her. And if I see nothing? Then we continue until you do. Nikolai moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Miss Doyle. The suite adjacent to yours is not monitored. Neither is Krisha's space. Those are neutral territories. Everywhere else in this compound, assume you are observed. Why tell me? His smile was winter sharp. Because even prisoners need the illusion of privacy. It makes them more cooperative. He left her standing in the dining room, wine untouched, food congealing on fine china, and the terrible understanding settling in her bones that Nikolai Makarov was far more dangerous than Marcus Thornhill had ever been. Because Thornhill had wanted to break her. Nikolai wanted to rebuild her. And she wasn't sure which was worse. The morning briefing was theater designed to intimidate. Kira recognized it immediately. The way Nikolai's 7 senior staff arranged themselves around the conference table, the calculated space left for her at Nikolai's right hand, the weight of attention as she entered with Krisha at her side. She'd spent 3 days observing these men. 3 days watching how they moved around the compound, how they interacted with the dog, how their micro-expressions shifted when Nikolai entered a room. 3 days cataloging data she didn't want and couldn't ignore. Dmitri sat closest to Nikolai, the second chair, the position of trust. Mid-40s, granite-faced, with the stillness of someone who'd killed enough times that violence no longer registered as remarkable. Krisha had shown him deference, but not affection. Across from Dmitri was Alexei, younger, sharp-suited, handling financial operations with a kind of precision that came from Ivy League education married to Vory pragmatism. The dog ignored him entirely. Then Victor, head of security, built like a concrete barrier, with scar tissue mapping old battles across his knuckles. Krisha had growled once when Victor reached for a pen too quickly. Interesting. The others blurred together. Enforcers. Logistics. Legal counsel, who probably specialized in making bodies disappear within regulatory frameworks. Miss Doyle. Nikolai's voice cut through her assessment. Your observations? She'd learned he did this. Put her on display, forcing her to prove her value in front of men who resented her presence. Another control mechanism. Another test. Krisha is comfortable with Dmitri and Alexei. Neutral toward most others. But Victor triggers a stress response. Elevated heart rate. Defensive positioning. It's subtle, but consistent. Victor's expression didn't change. but something flickered in his eyes.
Calculation, maybe.
Or concern. Victor has been with me for 12 years, Nikolai said mildly. Since before Krisha was acquired. I'm just reporting what I see. Keira kept her voice level. The dog doesn't lie. Whatever he's reacting to is real, even if I can't identify the specific trigger. The meeting continued, discussions of shipping routes and territorial boundaries that Keira tried not to absorb. She wasn't part of this world. Wouldn't let herself become part of it. She was here for Krisha, for the leverage against Thornhill, and then she'd disappear again into some new anonymity Nikolai's resources would provide. That's what she told herself, anyway. Afterward, she walked the grounds with Krisha, needing air that didn't taste like expensive cologne and barely controlled violence. The dog ranged ahead, investigating scents with professional thoroughness, and Keira found herself actually relaxing for the first time in days. Her phone, returned to her that morning with a new SIM card and strict instructions about approved contacts, buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. She should ignore it. Should report it immediately to Dmitri or Nikolai. Should follow the protocols they'd established for her safety. Instead, she answered, Miss Doyle. The voice was British, cultured, with the kind of accent that suggested old money and older schools. Please don't hang up. I'm calling because your life is in considerably more danger than you realize. Kira's hand tightened on the phone. Krisha's had swung toward her, reading her tension. Who is this? My name is Alistair Shaw. I'm with a private security consultancy contracted by the British government to recover stolen intelligence assets. The dog you're currently protecting? He's carrying classified data that was obtained through illegal means. Nikolai Makarov is not the victim here, Miss Doyle. He's a thief. Her heart hammered. I'm ending this call. In 18 seconds, a black sedan will pass the eastern gate. If you look carefully, you'll see a man in the passenger seat holding a photograph. It's a picture of you entering the Boston SPCA on March 14, 2023. The day Marcus Thornhill filed his complaint. We've been tracking you for quite some time, Keira. We simply chose not to act until you became relevant. She looked toward the gate.
Counted.
18 seconds later, the sedan appeared. The passenger window was down. A man with silver hair held up a photograph she could see even at this distance. Her, younger, walking into the building where her life had fallen apart. What do you want? The words came out steadier than she felt. To offer you something Nikolai Makarov never will. True freedom. A new identity, so clean even organizations like ours couldn't trace it. Financial security. And most importantly, the satisfaction of knowing you helped recover stolen property and prevented a dangerous criminal from leveraging that data against democratic governments. Nikolai said the microchip contains financial records. Shaw's laugh was cultured silk. Nikolai says many things. The microchip contains intelligence protocols, surveillance data on high-ranking officials, and communications that could compromise ongoing operations across 3 continents. It's not about money, Miss Doyle. It's about power. And Makarov has no intention of simply holding that power. He plans to sell it to the highest bidder. Terrorist organizations. Hostile states. Anyone willing to pay. Kira's mind raced. Could that be true? Everything about Nikolai suggested ruthless pragmatism. But terrorism? Selling out governments? Why should I believe you? Because, unlike Makarov, I'm not holding you prisoner. You're free to verify everything I've told you. Research my organization, Sentinel Strategic Solutions. Check our government contracts. Our legitimacy. Then ask yourself why a man who claims to be a simple businessman needs a compound with military-grade security and a biological encryption key embedded in a dog. If you're so legitimate, why not just raid the compound? Take Krisha by force. Because Makarov has powerful protections. Political connections we cannot simply bulldoze without creating an international incident. And because the extraction process is delicate, one wrong move and the data corrupts. We need someone on the inside. Someone the dog trusts. Someone who can facilitate a clean retrieval. Shaw paused. Someone who understands that sometimes the right choice isn't the easy one. Krisha pressed against her leg, reading her agitation. She buried her fingers in his fur, grounding herself. What exactly are you asking me to do? Small things initially. Confirm the dog's routines. Identify security gaps. Eventually, when the moment is right, ensure Krisha is in a specific location at a specific time. We handle the extraction. You walk away clean, with a new life and the knowledge that you prevented Makarov from weaponizing stolen intelligence. And if I refuse? Then you remain complicit in whatever Makarov does with that data. Every attack it enables. Every operation it compromises. Every life it costs. Shaw's voice softened, becoming almost gentle. I understand your position, Keira. You're caught between two dangerous men, trying to survive with what little leverage you have. But Marcus Thornhill was a predator in a boardroom. Nikolai Makarov is a predator on a global scale. Surely you see the difference.
She did.
That was the problem. She saw too many differences, too many variables, too many ways this could destroy her regardless of which choice she made. I need time to think. Of course. I'll contact you again in 48 hours. In the meantime, pay attention to what Makarov doesn't tell you. The questions he deflects. The rooms you're not allowed to enter. The conversations that stop when you appear. Shaw paused. And ask yourself why a man who claims to need your expertise keeps you so thoroughly isolated from the truth. The call ended. Keira stood in the manicured garden of a Russian mobster's compound, holding a phone that was probably monitored, with a dog worth $30 million pressed against her leg, and absolutely no idea who was lying to her. Or, if perhaps they both were. She looked down at Krisha. His amber eyes gazed back, patient and trusting and completely oblivious to the fact that he was the fulcrum on which her entire moral framework was about to break. What do I do? She whispered. The dog's tail swished once. Not an answer. Just presence. It would have to be enough. Keira found him in the library at 2 a.m., which was the first surprise. The second was the blood. She'd been unable to sleep, Shaw's words circling her mind like carrion birds, and had wandered the compound's approved areas with Krisha as her silent companion. The dog had led her here, to this room she hadn't known existed, floor-to-ceiling books in multiple languages, leather furniture worn soft with use, and Nikolai Makarov collapsed in a chair with his crutches on the floor and his left pant leg dark with spreading crimson. Get out. His voice was rough, lacking its usual controlled precision. Instead, Keira moved closer. Krisha was already there, pressing his massive head against Nikolai's hand with a whine she'd never heard from the dog before.
Concern.
The kind of sound a trained asset should make. You're bleeding. Brilliant observation, Dr. Doyle. Now leave. She ignored him, dropping to her knees beside the chair. Up close, she could see the problem. His left leg, the one that bore more weight, had given out. The brace he wore beneath his clothing had failed somehow, and the movement had torn something. Old scar tissue, maybe. Or new damage compounding old injury. Let me see. This is not your concern. The hell it isn't. I'm not letting you bleed out in a library because you're too proud to accept help. She reached for his pant leg, and his hand shot out, gripping her wrist with startling strength. Their eyes met. His were dark with pain, and something else, humiliation maybe. The kind that came from being seen as weak when weakness could be fatal. Please, she said quietly. Let me help. His grip loosened. Released. He leaned back in the chair, jaw clenched, and said nothing as she carefully rolled up the pant leg. The brace was custom-made, titanium and carbon fiber, engineered to compensate for catastrophic damage. She could see where it had cracked, the metal fatigued from years of bearing weight it was never designed to hold indefinitely. Beneath it, his leg was a roadmap of surgical scars, multiple reconstructions, pins, grafts. Someone had tried very hard to save this limb. Someone had also destroyed it first. Bathroom, she asked. Through there. He gestured to a door she'd assumed was a closet. She returned with supplies, antiseptic, gauze, medical tape from what was apparently his private cache. The fact that he kept emergency medical supplies in his library told her more about his life than any dossier could. Keira worked in silence, cleaning the reopened wound with practiced efficiency. It wasn't as bad as it looked, mostly superficial tearing where new tissue met old scar. But the brace failure was another matter entirely. "This needs to be replaced," she said, examining the crack. "You can't put weight on it like this." "I'm aware." "Then why were you walking without the crutches?" "Because I was trying to reach the top shelf." His admission came with bitter self-mockery. "Foolish, I know. But the book I wanted was there and I thought—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I thought I could manage." Keira looked up at the shelf in question. "Philosophy."
Kant.
The kind of dense text someone read when they couldn't sleep and needed their brain to work hard enough to exhaust itself. "You have insomnia," she said. "Not a question. I have a mind that won't shut down, and a body that reminds me constantly of my limitations. Sleep becomes negotiable." She finished bandaging, then sat back on her heels, studying him. Without the crutches, without the calculated movement and controlled presentation, he looked different. Younger. More human. The pain in his eyes wasn't just physical, it was the accumulated weight of years spent navigating a world that saw vulnerability as invitation. "What happened?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Nikolai's laugh was bitter. "Which time? The initial injury? The 12 subsequent surgeries? The infection that nearly cost me the leg entirely? The betrayal?" Keira met his gaze steadily. "This wasn't an accident. Someone did this to you." He was silent for a long moment, studying her with that unnerving intensity. Then, surprisingly, he answered. "His name was Dmitry Volkov. My business partner for 8 years. My friend, I thought, for longer. We built this organization together from nothing. 2 boys from Moscow with more ambition than sense." He reached down, fingers brushing the scarred tissue almost absently. He decided he wanted it all for himself. Arranged a meeting with a rival organization, offered to sell me out for territory and protection. I was supposed to die in that warehouse. The bomb was supposed to kill me instantly. But it didn't.
No.
It killed 4 of my men. It destroyed my legs and left me trapped under rubble for 6 hours before extraction. And it taught me that loyalty, true loyalty, is the rarest commodity in this world. His voice was soft, almost meditative. "Dmitry thought my injury made me weak. Thought a man on crutches couldn't lead, couldn't command respect, couldn't hold power. He was wrong." Keira understood then. The crutches weren't a weakness Nikolai compensated for. They were proof he'd survived what should have killed him. They were a threat, visible evidence that he was more dangerous injured than most men were whole. What happened to Volkov? He learned the error of his assumption. Nikolai's smile was winter ice. Slowly. She should have been horrified. Should have recoiled from the casual admission of revenge, of torture, of everything that made Nikolai Makarov exactly what the world believed him to be. Instead, she found herself understanding. Marcus Thornhill had betrayed her trust, used her compassion as a weapon, and walked away unscathed while she lost everything. If she'd had Nikolai's resources, his power, his absolute certainty that justice was whatever he defined it to be, would she have been so different? "That's why Krisha matters so much to you," she said slowly. "Not just the data. The dog himself. He's loyal. Completely. Instinctively. Everything Volkov wasn't." "Very good, Miss Doyle." Nikolai reached out, scratching behind Krisha's ears with genuine affection. "This beast has saved my life twice. Once from an assassination attempt. Once from believing I was completely alone in this world. His loyalty is not conditioned on my strength or my weakness. It simply is." Keira watched his hand move through Krisha's fur, the gesture unconscious and intimate. This was the man behind the monster. The one who read philosophy at 2 a.m. and kept a dog as his most trusted companion and carried the weight of betrayal in his bones. "I need to tell you something," she heard herself say. Nikolai's hand stilled. "About." "Someone contacted me. Yesterday." Keira found him in the library at 2 a.m., which was the first surprise. The second was the blood. She'd been unable to sleep, Shaw's words circling her mind like carrion birds, and had wandered the compound's approved areas with Krisha as her silent companion. The dog had led her here, To this room she hadn't known existed, floor-to-ceiling books in multiple languages, leather furniture worn soft with use, and Nikolai Makarov collapsed in a chair with his crutches on the floor and his left pant leg dark with spreading crimson. "Get out." His voice was rough, lacking its usual controlled precision. Instead, Keira moved closer. Krisha was already there, pressing his massive head against Nikolai's hand with a whine she'd never heard from the dog before.
Concern.
The kind of sound a trained asset should make. "You're bleeding." "Brilliant observation, Dr. Doyle. Now leave." She ignored him, dropping to her knees beside the chair. Up close, she could see the problem. His left leg, the one that bore more weight, had given out. The brace he wore beneath his clothing had failed somehow, and the movement had torn something. Old scar tissue, maybe. Or new damage compounding old injury. "Let me see." "This is not your concern." "The hell it isn't. I'm not letting you bleed out in a library because you're too proud to accept help." She reached for his pant leg, and his hand shot out, gripping her wrist with startling strength. Their eyes met. His were dark with pain, and something else, humiliation maybe. The kind that came from being seen as weak when weakness could be fatal. "Please," she said quietly. "Let me help." His grip loosened. Released. He leaned back in the chair, jaw clenched, and said nothing as she carefully rolled up the pant leg. The brace was custom-made, titanium and carbon fiber, engineered to compensate for catastrophic damage. She could see where it had cracked, the metal fatigued from years of bearing weight it was never designed to hold indefinitely. Beneath it, his leg was a roadmap of surgical scars, multiple reconstructions, pins, grafts. Someone had tried very hard to save this limb. Someone had also destroyed it first. "Bathroom?" she asked. "Through there." He gestured to a door she'd assumed was a closet. She returned with supplies, antiseptic, gauze, medical tape from what was apparently his private cache. The fact that he kept emergency medical supplies in his library told her more about his life than any dossier could. Keira worked in silence, cleaning the reopened wound with practiced efficiency. It wasn't as bad as it looked, mostly superficial tearing where new tissue met old scar. But the brace failure was another matter entirely. "This needs to be replaced," she said, examining the crack. "You can't put weight on it like this." "I'm aware." "Then why were you walking without the crutches?" "Because I was trying to reach the top shelf." His admission came with bitter self-mockery. "Foolish, I know. But the book I wanted was there and I thought." He trailed off, shaking his head. "I thought I could manage." Keira looked up at the shelf in question. "Philosophy."
Kant.
The kind of dense text someone read when they couldn't sleep and needed their brain to work hard enough to exhaust itself. "You have insomnia," she said. "Not a question. I have a mind that won't shut down, and a body that reminds me constantly of my limitations. Sleep becomes negotiable." She finished bandaging, then sat back on her heels, studying him. Without the crutches, without the calculated movement and controlled presentation, he looked different. Younger. More human. The pain in his eyes wasn't just physical, it was the accumulated weight of years spent navigating a world that saw vulnerability as invitation. "What happened?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Nikolai's laugh was bitter. "Which time? The initial injury? The 12 subsequent surgeries? The infection that nearly cost me the leg entirely? The betrayal?" Keira met his gaze steadily. "This wasn't an accident. Someone did this to you." He was silent for a long moment, studying her with that unnerving intensity. Then, surprisingly, he answered. "His name was Dmitry Volkov. My business partner for 8 years. My friend, I thought, for longer. We built this organization together from nothing. 2 boys from Moscow with more ambition than sense." He reached down, fingers brushing the scarred tissue almost absently. He decided he wanted it all for himself. Arranged a meeting with a rival organization, offered to sell me out for territory and protection. I was supposed to die in that warehouse. The bomb was supposed to kill me instantly. But it didn't.
No.
It killed 4 of my men. It destroyed my legs and left me trapped under rubble for 6 hours before extraction. And it taught me that loyalty, true loyalty, is the rarest commodity in this world. His voice was soft, almost meditative. Dmitri thought my injury made me weak. Thought a man on crutches couldn't lead, couldn't command respect, couldn't hold power. He was wrong. Keira understood then. The crutches weren't a weakness Nikolai compensated for. They were proof he'd survived what should have killed him. They were a threat, visible evidence that he was more dangerous injured than most men were whole. What happened to Volkov? He learned the error of his assumption. Nikolai's smile was winter ice. Slowly. She should have been horrified. Should have recoiled from the casual admission of revenge, of torture, of everything that made Nikolai Makarov exactly what the world believed him to be. Instead, she found herself understanding. Marcus Thornhill had betrayed her trust, used her compassion as a weapon, and walked away unscathed while she lost everything. If she'd had Nikolai's resources, his power, his absolute certainty that justice was whatever he defined it to be, would she have been so different? That's why Krisha matters so much to you, she said slowly. Not just the data. The dog himself. He's loyal. Completely. Instinctively. Everything Volkov wasn't. Very good, Miss Doyle. Nikolai reached out, scratching behind Krisha's ears with genuine affection. This beast has saved my life twice. Once from an assassination attempt. Once from believing I was completely alone in this world. His loyalty is not conditioned on my strength or my weakness. It simply is. Keira watched his hand move through Krisha's fur, the gesture unconscious and intimate. This was the man behind the monster. The one who read philosophy at 2 a.m. and kept a dog as his most trusted companion and carried the weight of betrayal in his bones. I need to tell you something, she heard herself say. Nikolai's hand stilled. About. Someone contacted me. Yesterday. The second course arrived. Discussion shifted to shipping routes, territorial boundaries, the kind of logistics that sounded legitimate until you understood what was actually being transported. Keira catalogued every micro-expression, every tension, every tell. Gregor treated Nikolai with formal respect edged with condescension. The old guard tolerating new leadership while waiting for inevitable failure. His body language suggested patience, not betrayal. Chun was harder to read. Perfect corporate composure, genuine competence, loyalty that seemed rooted in pragmatism rather than affection. He'd betray Nikolai if the math made sense, but not for emotional reasons. Mikhail was the anomaly. He laughed too loudly at Nikolai's dry observations, agreed too readily with decisions that clearly troubled him. And every time Nikolai mentioned loyalty, family, or trust, something flickered across Mikhail's face before vanishing.
Pain.
Old and deep and carefully hidden. During the third course, Nikolai's phone vibrated. He glanced at it, and something in his posture changed. A tightening Keira had learned meant danger. Gentlemen, excuse me for a moment. He rose with careful precision, crutches positioning perfect, and moved toward the private restroom. The conversation continued without him, but the energy shifted. Gregor and Chin discussed shipping manifests. Mikhail fell silent, drinking his wine with mechanical efficiency. Then Mikhail's eyes found Keira. You're the veterinarian, he said. Not a question. The one caring for Krisha. Yes. He's a good dog. Loyal. Mikhail's smile didn't reach his eyes. Unlike some people in this world, dogs can't betray you. Can't decide their blood matters more than your life. Can't make you pay for sins you didn't commit. Kira's pulse jumped. I don't. My cousin Dmitri made terrible choices, Mikhail continued, voice soft enough the others couldn't hear. But he was still family. Still someone I loved. And Nikolai killed him so slowly that Dmitri begged for death for 3 days before receiving it. He took another sip of wine. You should know that about the man you're working for. He doesn't just eliminate threats. He makes them suffer. He makes their families watch. He ensures everyone understands the cost of disloyalty. Before Keira could respond, Nikolai returned. His eyes swept the table, and she knew he'd seen her talking to Mikhail. Knew and was cataloging it for later analysis. The dinner concluded with dessert and coffee and discussions of next meetings. When they finally left, Kira's head pounded with contradicting information and her stomach churned with expensive food she couldn't digest. In the car, Nikolai was silent for 10 minutes. Then, your assessment. Gregor is old guard. Resentful, but not actively hostile. Chun is pragmatic to the point of amorality. He'd betray you if it made business sense, but he has no emotional investment either way. She paused. Mikhail is the traitor. Why? Because he's the only one who cares enough to hate you. Gregor and Chun see you as a business relationship. Mikhail sees you as the man who tortured his cousin to death. That's personal. That's the kind of rage that justifies betrayal. Nikolai's smile was winter itself. Very good, Miss Doyle. And what did Mikhail say to you when I stepped away? She told him, word for word. Watched his expression remain perfectly controlled. And does knowing what I did to Dmitry Volkov, change your assessment of my character? Kira met his eyes.
No.
Because Shaw would do the same thing if you crossed him. Because Marcus Thornhill destroyed my life and walked away clean, and part of me wishes I'd had the power to make him suffer the way you made Volkov suffer. She swallowed hard. The difference between us isn't morality, Mr. Makarov. It's just opportunity and resources. For the first time since she'd met him, Nikolai looked genuinely surprised. Then he laughed, dark and real, and almost fond. Miss Doyle, he said quietly, you are significantly more dangerous than you realize. Kira woke at 3 a.m. with the answer burning through her consciousness like revelation. She'd been dreaming of the clinic, of that first night with Krisha bleeding on her table, and her subconscious had finally connected pieces her waking mind had catalogued but not assembled. She threw off the silk sheets, another luxury she hadn't asked for, and grabbed the file Nikolai had given her weeks ago. The one with photographs of Krisha's wound from every angle, medical reports, ballistic analysis. She spread them across the writing desk, hands shaking with certainty. The wound wasn't from a bullet. She'd known that immediately. The trajectory was wrong, the tissue damage too controlled. What she hadn't understood was why it looked so precise, so surgical, so deliberately calculated to incapacitate without killing. Because it wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to command. She grabbed her laptop, pulling up veterinary databases, searching for training equipment used in high-level protection work. Electronic collars. Remote-activated deterrents. Compliance devices that could deliver pain on demand to enforce behavior modification.
There.
The Cerberus K-9 control system. Military-grade, restricted sale, designed for handlers who needed absolute control over aggressive animals in combat situations. A small device that delivered targeted electrical stimulation precise enough to drop a trained attack dog mid-charge without causing permanent damage. The wound pattern matched exactly. Krisha hadn't been shot during the attack. He'd been shocked by someone using his own training equipment against him. Someone who knew exactly where to place the device for maximum effectiveness. Someone who'd trained with him extensively enough to know his attack patterns and how to interrupt them. Someone who'd been his handler. Kira was moving before thought caught up to action, still in her sleep clothes, barefoot, clutching the file and her laptop. Krisha followed, sensing her urgency, moving from relaxed companion to alert guardian in seconds. The compound was different at night, darker, quieter, with security that watched from shadows she couldn't see. She moved through corridors she'd memorized, toward Nikolai's private wing, knowing this couldn't wait until morning. 2 guards materialized before she reached his door. Miss Doyle. The larger one spoke with polite firmness. Mr. Makarov is not to be disturbed. It's about the attack on Krisha. I know who did it. Her voice carried enough conviction that both men exchanged glances. Either you let me through, or you explain to him tomorrow why you delayed critical intelligence. 30 seconds later, she was in Nikolai's private study. He sat behind his desk still fully dressed despite the hour, papers spread before him. Reading glasses perched on his nose in a gesture so unexpectedly human it stopped her momentum. He looked up, taking in her disheveled appearance with raised eyebrows. Miss Doyle. This is either urgent or you've developed a flair for the dramatic. Victor didn't attack Krisha. She moved to his desk, spreading the photographs. But he knows who did. He's been protecting someone. That's why the dog reacts to him, not because Victor hurt him, but because Victor carries the scent memory of the person who did. Nikolai removed his glasses slowly, giving her his complete attention. Explain. She showed him the wound patterns, the database information, the specifications of the Cerberus system. Watched his expression shift from patient interest to focused intensity. This device requires extensive training to use effectively, she continued. You can't just pick it up and know where to place it, how long to activate it, how to interrupt a trained attack dog mid-charge without causing permanent damage or making the animal completely unmanageable afterward. Whoever used this on Krisha had trained with him for months, maybe years. The attack happened during transport, Nikolai said slowly, his mind clearly racing ahead. Victor was supervising the route, but he wasn't in the vehicle. We lost 3 men that night. The driver, the handler, and the rear guard. Who was the handler? Yuri Fedorov, 28 years old. With me for 6 years. Trained with Krisha from the beginning. Nikolai's jaw tightened. His body was recovered at the scene. Gunshot wound to the head. We assumed he died defending the dog. What if he didn't? Keira pulled up another photograph, the crime scene image she'd only glanced at before, not wanting to see death. Now she forced herself to look. What if Yuri was the inside man? He shocked Krisha into compliance, handed him over to Shaw's team, and they killed him to eliminate the witness. Clean extraction, no loose ends, and you'd never suspect your loyal handler was the traitor. Nikolai was silent, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Then he reached for his phone, pressing a single button. Dmitri. My office.
Now.
Bring everything we have on Yuri Fedorov, financial records, communications, surveillance footage from the 3 months before his death. Everything. He ended the call and looked at Keira with something approaching respect. If you're correct, this changes the operational parameters considerably. Yuri had access to everything, routes, protocols, security details. His betrayal would explain how Shaw's team knew exactly when and where to strike. Victor knew, Keira said quietly. That's why Krisha reacts to him. Victor either suspected Yuri or discovered the truth afterward and chose to keep it quiet. Maybe he was protecting Yuri's family. Maybe he was protecting his own reputation for missing the signs. But he knows. Then we'll ask him. Nikolai reached for his crutches, rising with controlled precision. Directly. Now? It's 3 a.m. Miss Doyle, if your theory is correct, then Shaw didn't just steal my dog. He compromised my entire security infrastructure through Yuri, which means he knows everything about this compound, my operations, my vulnerabilities. His eyes were winter dark. And if Victor has been concealing that truth, then he's either complicit or catastrophically negligent. Either way, we're all in significantly more danger than we realized. Dmitri arrived within minutes, tablet in hand, face grim. I pulled Fedorov's records. There are irregularities. Communications encrypted beyond standard protocol. Financial deposits we can't trace. Nothing definitively incriminating, but enough to warrant investigation. Why wasn't this flagged during routine security reviews? Nikolai's voice carried lethal quiet. Victor cleared him personally.
Multiple times.
Said the encrypted communications were related to a family matter, a sister with medical issues who needed privacy. Dmitri's expression was stone. I deferred to Victor's judgment. That was my error. Where is Victor now? His quarters. He's not scheduled for duty until 6. Bring him here. Tell him nothing. Just that I require his presence immediately. Dmitri left. The silence in the study felt electric, dangerous. Keira realized she was still in her sleep clothes, thin cotton that did nothing to ward off the chills settling into her bones. Nikolai noticed. He shrugged out of his suit jacket and held it out to her. You're cold. She took it because refusing seemed petty and because the gesture surprised her into compliance. The jacket was warm from his body heat, smelling of expensive cologne and something underneath, gun oil, maybe, or just the scent of a man who lived perpetually ready for violence. "If I'm right about this," she said quietly, "Shaw will know we figured it out. He'll have contingencies." Shaw always has contingencies. That's what makes him exceptional at his job. Nikolai moved to the window, looking out over the compound with the air of someone mentally fortifying defenses. But he made one critical error in judgment. "What's that?" He turned, and his smile was absolutely merciless. He assumed I wouldn't be willing to burn down everything I've built to protect what's mine. He was wrong. 20 minutes later, Victor entered the study. He took in the scene, Keira in Nikolai's jacket, the files spread across the desk, Dmitri positioned by the door, and his face went carefully neutral. "Boss." "Yuri Fedorov," Nikolai said without preamble. "Tell me the truth, Victor. All of it. And decide very carefully whether loyalty to a dead man is worth more than your own life." Victor's shoulders sagged. Just slightly. Just enough. And Keira knew they'd been right. "I found out 2 days after the attack," Victor said, his voice raw. "Found encrypted communications on Yuri's personal device that security hadn't swept. He'd been feeding information to an outside contact for 3 months.
Routes.
Protocols. Everything Shaw would need to plan a perfect extraction." He looked at Nikolai, and there was genuine anguish in his eyes. "Yuri was like a son to me. I trained him myself. I couldn't destroy his family's memory by exposing what he'd done. So you concealed treason." Nikolai's voice was silk over razors. "Allowed a security breach that could destroy everything we've built. Put every person in this compound at risk. All to protect the reputation of a traitor." "Yes." Victor met his eyes. "I was wrong. I know that. But I couldn't." The window exploded inward. Keira hit the floor on instinct, Krisha covering her body with his own. Glass rained down like crystal daggers. Gunfire erupted, professional, controlled, suppressive fire designed to pin them down rather than kill. Nikolai moved with shocking speed despite the crutches, pulling a weapon from beneath his desk with practiced efficiency. Dmitri was already returning fire, and Victor had produced a gun from somewhere, covering the window with lethal competence. "Shaw," Nikolai said, almost conversational despite the chaos. "He's been waiting for us to identify the leak. Now he's eliminating the evidence." Another window shattered. Smoke grenades followed, filling the study with choking white clouds. And through the smoke, Keira heard Krisha growl, the deep, primal sound of a dog recognizing a threat. Shaw was here, in the compound, coming for the dog, the data, and everyone who knew the truth. If Keira and Nikolai's journey is keeping you on the edge of your seat, please like this video, share it with fellow romance thriller fans, and subscribe to our channel for more intense, passionate stories. The smoke was strategic, engineered to disorient without completely blinding. Through the white haze, Keira saw shapes moving with military precision, professionals executing a plan they'd rehearsed until it became muscle memory. Dmitri fired 3 controlled bursts, and someone grunted in the darkness beyond the shattered windows. "Keira." Nikolai's voice cut through the chaos with absolute clarity. "Get to the safe room. Now." She couldn't see him through the smoke, but she could hear the controlled rage beneath his command. This wasn't just an attack. This was personal. Shaw had violated his sanctuary, his carefully constructed fortress, and Nikolai's pride was bleeding alongside his security. Krisha pressed against her leg, his growl continuous and feral. The dog wanted to engage, to attack, but was holding position because she hadn't given him release. Years of training warring with protective instinct. "I'm not leaving." The explosion wasn't large, but it was perfectly placed. The study's interior wall blew inward, creating an entry point from a hallway beyond. More smoke poured through, and with it came the staccato rhythm of tactical boots on hardwood. Dmitri moved to intercept, and Keira saw the muzzle flash before she heard the gunshot. Dmitri went down hard, clutching his shoulder, weapon skittering across the floor. Victor returned fire, driving the attackers back momentarily, but Keira could see the calculation in his movements. He was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and running on guilt-fueled desperation rather than tactical advantage. Then the lights died. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later, dim red bulbs that turned the smoke into Hell's Cape fog. Keira's veterinary training screamed at her to find cover, to protect the vital organs, to survive. But her hands found Krisha's collar instead, holding him close, feeling his massive body vibrate with barely restrained violence. Night vision, Nikolai said from somewhere to her left. They have full visibility. We don't. Victor, get Dmitri to medical. I'll. Something metal clattered across the floor between them. Small, cylindrical, hissing. Gas, Victor choked out. Move. But it wasn't tear gas or smoke. The smell hit Keira immediately, sweet, chemical, familiar from her clinic work. Ketamine derivative. Veterinary-grade sedative. Enough to drop a large animal in seconds. Enough to drop Krisha. No. She pulled her shirt up over her nose, trying to drag the dog toward the door, but Krisha was already stumbling, his legs buckling beneath him. 140 pounds of muscle and loyalty collapsing as the sedative hit his system with professional precision. Keira's vision swam. Her own limbs felt heavy, disconnected. She saw Nikolai abandon his crutches, crawling toward her with desperate speed, his ruined legs dragging behind him. Saw Victor firing blindly into the smoke. Saw Dmitri unconscious against the wall, blood spreading across his shoulder. Then shapes materialized through the red-lit haze. 3 men in tactical gear, gas masks turning them into insects, moving with coordinated efficiency. One kicked Nikolai's weapon away almost contemptuously. Another secured Victor with zip ties. The third headed straight for Krisha. No. Keira slurred, trying to stand, trying to fight, but her body wouldn't respond. Don't, you can't. The man lifted Krisha like the massive dog weighed nothing, hoisting the unconscious animal over his shoulder. He turned toward the blown-out wall, and through her fading consciousness, Keira saw him clearly.
Not Shaw.
Someone younger, harder, with the empty eyes of someone who'd killed professionally for so long that it was just labor. He paused at the threshold and placed something on the floor. A white card, pristine against the blood and glass-covered study. Then he was gone, taking Krisha, taking the $30 million of encrypted intelligence, taking the only truly loyal thing in Nikolai's world. Keira's vision tunneled to black. She woke to urgent voices and the sharp smell of ammonia. Stable, but the sedative dose was calculated for the dog, not humans. She'll be disoriented for another hour. I don't have an hour. Nikolai's voice, ragged with something she'd never heard before.
Fear.
Where is she?
Here.
Keira forced her eyes open. The study looked like a war zone. Shattered glass, bullet holes in the antique wood paneling, blood streaked across expensive carpet. Medics worked on Dmitri, who was conscious and cursing steadily in Russian. Victor sat against the wall, hands zip-tied, face gray with shame or shock or both. Nikolai was beside her, crutches abandoned again, his hands gentle on her shoulders despite the violent tension in every line of his body. Krisha, she managed. They took. I know.
His jaw was granite.
They left this. He held up the white card. Keira's vision swam as she tried to focus on the text. Clean, professional typeset. No fingerprints, she'd bet. Nothing traceable. Miss Doyle. The dog is unharmed and will remain so if you follow instructions precisely. I understand your attachment to the animal and respect your professional ethics. Mr. Makarov will tell you that Krisha is merely an asset, that the data matters more than the dog's life. He will attempt to use this situation to his advantage, possibly sacrificing the animal to protect his intelligence. I'm offering you an alternative. Come alone to the address below. Bring the extraction protocols for the microchip. They're in Makarov's private safe, code 041289. I will exchange Krisha for the protocols and safe passage for you both. You have 6 hours. If Makarov's men accompany you, the dog dies. If you alert authorities, the dog dies. If you attempt any tactical interference, the dog dies. The choice is yours, Keira. Save the dog or protect a criminal's stolen data. Your move.
Yes.
The address was printed at the bottom. An industrial park outside Philadelphia. Abandoned, probably. Perfect for an ambush. Kira's hands trembled as she took the card. The safe code. 041289. What is it? Nikolai's expression was unreadable. The date Dmitry Volkov betrayed me. April 12th, 1989. He stood with visible effort, reaching for his crutches. Shaw did his research. He knows I'll come. Kira struggled to her feet, pushing away the medic who tried to steady her. He's counting on it. On me choosing Krisha over your data. Because he understands leverage. Nikolai moved to his destroyed desk, pulling a tablet from the wreckage. And he's correct. I would sacrifice the dog to protect the intelligence. It's the rational choice. The strategic choice. He looked at her. But you won't make that choice, will you, Miss Doyle? It wasn't a question. Kira thought about Krisha's amber eyes. The way he'd trusted her from the beginning. The way he'd covered her body with his own during the attack, protecting her even as the sedative hit his system. Loyalty so absolute it transcended training and became something pure. She thought about Nikolai's fortress, his empire built on violence and leverage. The data that could topple governments. The intelligence worth more than a single dog's life by any rational calculation. Then she thought about Marcus Thornhill, about powerful men who treated the vulnerable as assets, about a world where everything had a price and loyalty was just another commodity to be traded. I'm going. The words came out steady, certain. Give me the code. Give me whatever I need to get Krisha back. It's a trap. I know. Shaw will kill you the moment you hand over the protocols. You're a witness. A liability. He's not sentimental about loose ends. Then I'll be careful. Nikolai laughed, bitter and sharp. Careful. Against Alistair Shaw. Miss Doyle, you're talking about going against the most efficient killer I've ever encountered, and I've encountered many. I don't care. Kira met his eyes, and she saw her own reflection in them, small, determined, absolutely committed to an irrational choice. That dog trusted me, chose me, and I'm not letting him die, because I was too afraid to act. The study was silent except for Dimitri's labored breathing and Victor's quiet sobbing. Then Nikolai reached into his jacket, pulled out a small device, and handed it to her.
Tracker.
Military grade. I'll know where you are at all times. You're letting me go? I'm giving you the illusion of choice, just like Shaw. His smile was winter itself. You were always going to do this, with or without my permission. At least this way, I can attempt to keep you alive when everything goes catastrophically wrong. He gave her the safe code. Showed her where the extraction protocols were stored. Explained the timing, the tactical parameters, everything Shaw would need to safely remove the microchip from Krisha without corrupting the data. Everything that would also get her killed. Kira memorized it all. Checked the address on the card. 5 hours and 43 minutes until deadline. At the door, she paused. If something happens to me, nothing will happen to you. Nikolai's voice carried absolute conviction. Because I will burn Shaw's entire operation to ash before I allow him to take something else that's mine. Kira didn't ask if he meant the data or her. She didn't want to know the answer. She walked out of the compound with the protocols in her bag, the tracker in her pocket, and the terrible certainty that she was about to make the same mistake every woman in her position made. Trusting that love for a dog, for an ideal, for the fantasy that loyalty mattered more than survival, would somehow be enough. The industrial park was exactly as predicted. Abandoned warehouses bleeding rust, broken windows like dead eyes, the kind of place where screams wouldn't reach anyone who cared. Kira's headlights cut through the pre-dawn darkness, illuminating Building 7C precisely as Shaw's note specified. Her hands were steady on the wheel. That surprised her. Everything else, her racing pulse, her shallow breathing, the cold sweat on her spine, screamed terror. But her hands remained rock-steady as she parked and killed the engine. The tracker in her pocket felt like both lifeline and death sentence. Nikolai would come. She knew that with absolute certainty. The question was whether he'd arrive in time or simply collect her body afterward. She grabbed the bag containing the extraction protocols and stepped out into air that tasted like metal and old oil. Miss Doyle. Shaw's voice came from the darkness of the warehouse entrance. Punctual. I appreciate that in an associate. He stepped into her headlights and Keira finally saw him clearly. Mid-50s, silver-haired, wearing tactical clothing like a bespoke suit. Handsome in the way aging aristocrats were handsome. All bone structure and confidence. His smile was warm, avuncular, the expression of someone offering help rather than death. Where's Krisha? Her voice didn't shake. Small victory. Safe. Sedated but unharmed as promised. Inside. He gestured toward the warehouse. Bring the protocols, and we'll make the exchange. Every instinct screamed trap. She walked toward it anyway. The warehouse interior was vast and empty except for a surgical setup that looked obscenely professional. Portable operating table, veterinary equipment, monitors. And on the table, unconscious and intubated, was Krisha. Keira's breath caught. They'd already prepped him for extraction. For lines ran into his front leg. The area over his chest had been shaved, marked with surgical pen. They'd been waiting for her arrival to begin cutting. He's stable, Shaw said behind her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive, understated. My veterinary surgeon is quite skilled. The extraction will take approximately 15 minutes. Krisha will survive with minimal scarring. And then you let us go. She faced him, holding the bag against her chest like armor. Shaw's smile gained teeth. Of course. You have my word. Your word means nothing. A new voice, cold, British female. A woman emerged from the shadows, older than Shaw, with a kind of face that suggested MI6 training and zero tolerance for sentiment. She's seen too much, Alistair. Knows too much. The girl dies once we have the protocols. Margaret, we discussed. We discussed expedient lies to secure cooperation. Now we have cooperation. Margaret's gun appeared with casual expertise, aimed at Keira's center mass. The protocols, Miss Doyle.
Now.
Or I shoot the dog first and take them from your corpse. Keira's mind raced. The tracker in her pocket. Nikolai somewhere in the darkness. Time she needed to buy, space she needed to create. She held out the bag. They're encrypted. Password protected. You'll need me alive to access them. Unlikely. Margaret took the bag, tossed it to Shaw. We have decryption specialists who... The warehouse lights died. Not gradually. Not from power failure. Deliberately cut with tactical precision that turned the vast space into absolute darkness. Keira dropped to the ground on instinct. Margaret's gun fired twice, muzzle flash illuminating nothing but empty space where Keira had stood. Then movement in the darkness, fast and violent. Margaret screamed, sharp, short, cut off with brutal finality. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in blood-red dimness. Margaret was on the ground, neck at an impossible angle. Shaw had his weapon drawn, tracking movement Keira couldn't see. Then Nikolai stepped into the light. He moved without crutches. Just walked, limping heavily, each step clearly agonizing, but moving with lethal purpose and shocking speed. His ruined legs carried him with a kind of controlled violence that came from years of forcing destroyed tissue to obey through sheer will. Blood ran down his left pant leg. The brace had failed completely. He was walking on trauma and determination and absolutely nothing else. Shaw fired 3 times professional placement center mass. Nikolai twisted, impossibly fast despite the injury, and 2 rounds hit the Kevlar vest beneath his jacket. The third grazed his shoulder, spinning him slightly. He didn't stop walking. Christ, Shaw breathed, genuine awe breaking through professional composure. The reports didn't do you justice, Makarov. They never do. Nikolai's voice was conversational despite the blood, despite the pain that had to be excruciating. Put down the weapon, Alistair. You've lost. Have I? Shaw moved behind the surgical table, using Krisha's unconscious body as shield. His gun pressed against the dog's head. I still have your $30 million asset and leverage. Leave now, and the dog lives. Stay, and I put a round through his brain before you can reach me. Keira saw Nikolai's calculation, the distance, the timing, the near certainty that Shaw would fire before Nikolai could close the gap. Saw him weigh the data against the dog's life, just like Shaw predicted. Then she remembered something. Something Shaw had forgotten in his tactical perfection. Krisha wasn't just sedated. He was only sedated. She pulled the small device from her pocket, the emergency stim injector Nikolai had given her weeks ago when she'd first started working with Krisha. For emergencies. For situations where the dog needed to wake immediately despite sedation. She triggered it. The injector delivered its payload through the 4-line already in Krisha's leg. Chemical cocktail designed to reverse sedation in combat animals. Adrenaline, amphetamines, compounds that would wake Krisha and make him very, very angry. Shaw had 3 seconds before 140 pounds of enraged, disoriented Caucasian shepherd erupted from the table. He used them trying to shoot Nikolai instead of securing the dog. Mistake. Krisha hit Shaw like a freight train, all teeth and fury and protective instinct focused on the man threatening his handler. Shaw went down hard, gun skittering away, screaming as Krisha's jaws found his throat. Nikolai moved, faster than should be possible on destroyed legs, grabbing Shaw's weapon, pressing it against the man's temple even as Krisha continued his assault. Krisha.
Out.
Nikolai's command was absolute. The dog released immediately, backing away, but remaining ready, covered in Shaw's blood, eyes wild with chemical-induced aggression. Shaw lay gasping, throat torn but not severed, Krisha's training allowing him to maul without killing.
Yet.
The protocols, Nikolai said calmly, as if he wasn't bleeding, wasn't standing on legs that should have collapsed minutes ago. Where are your extraction specialists? Fuck you. Shaw choked out. Nikolai shot him in the kneecap. Shaw's scream echoed through the warehouse. Keira flinched, but didn't look away. This was who Nikolai was, the man who'd tortured Dmitry Volkov for 3 days. The man who turned pain into precision instrument. The specialists. Their location. You have 10 seconds before I move to the other knee. Shaw gave up the address between sobs. Nikolai made a call, brief, coded. Then he finally allowed his legs to give out. He collapsed against the surgical table, face gray with blood loss and pain, but his gun never wavered from Shaw's head. Keira ran to him. Her hands found the wound on his shoulder, applying pressure, cataloging damage through veterinary training that translated adequately to human tissue. You came, she said stupidly. Of course I came. His smile was bloody and genuine. You chose loyalty over survival, Miss Doyle. That's rare. Worth protecting. You're bleeding. Your legs, the damage you've done, is acceptable cost. He looked at Krisha, who'd moved to position himself between them and Shaw, still aggressive, still protecting. He's all right. The stim will wear off in an hour. He'll be disoriented, aggressive until then, but unharmed.
Good.
Nikolai's eyes found hers. You used the injector. Quick thinking. Tactical awareness under pressure. You'd make an excellent operative, Miss Doyle. I'm a veterinarian. You're significantly more than that. You simply haven't accepted it yet. Sirens in the distance. Nikolai's people, probably. Coming to clean up the mess, disappear the bodies, make this night vanish into paperwork and plausible deniability. Shaw was still conscious, watching them with the kind of professional assessment that didn't stop even facing death. You won't kill me, he gasped. Too valuable. Too connected. I can give you names, operations, intelligence you'd never. Nikolai shot him between the eyes. The warehouse fell silent except for Krisha's low growl and Kira's sharp intake of breath. Some debts, Nikolai said quietly, can only be paid in blood. He came into my home, hurt my people, took what was mine, thought he could use your compassion as leverage against me. He looked at her, and his eyes were winter dark. He was wrong about what I'm willing to sacrifice. Keira should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual execution, from the blood-soaked pragmatism, from everything that made Nikolai Makarov exactly the monster the world believed him to be. Instead, she found herself understanding. Shaw would have killed her, would have killed Krisha, would have done it with the same professional efficiency Nikolai had just demonstrated, feeling nothing, regretting nothing, moving on to the next operation without pause. At least Nikolai's violence was personal. At least he cared. "Come here," Nikolai said, and she realized he was extending his hand. "Help me up. My people will be here in minutes, and I'd prefer not to be found bleeding on a warehouse floor." She helped him stand, supporting his weight as he retrieved his crutches from where Dmitri had apparently left them near the entrance. His legs shook with effort, and she could see the damage he'd done. Torn tissue, stress graphs, probably set his recovery back months. All to save her. All because she'd chosen a dog over Data.
Why?
The question escaped before she could stop it. Why risk everything for me? For Krisha? The Data was worth. The Data is replaceable. I have backups, redundancies, alternative intelligence streams. He leaned heavily on the crutches, breathing hard. But loyalty? True loyalty that chooses principle over survival? That's priceless, Miss Doyle. And I will burn down the world to protect it when I find it. Krisha, calming as the stim wore off, pushed between them. Kira's hand found his blood-matted fur, and Nikolai's hand covered hers. 3 survivors standing in a warehouse full of death. A mobster, a veterinarian, and a dog. It shouldn't have felt like victory.
Somehow, impossibly, it did.
The compound's medical wing smelled like antiseptic and expensive care, the kind of facility that could handle gunshot wounds without involving inconvenient authorities. Kira worked on Nikolai's shoulder while a surgeon Dmitri had summoned to examine the catastrophic damage to his legs. "You've torn the primary graft," the surgeon said in accented English, probing with clinical detachment. "Stressed the secondary reconstruction beyond recommended parameters. The inflammation alone will require weeks of aggressive treatment. You'll need complete bed rest for at least."
No.
Nikolai's voice was flat, absolute. "Mr. Makarov, if you continue putting weight on these legs, you risk permanent mobility loss. The damage you've sustained tonight could." I said no. He looked at the surgeon with eyes that had watched Shaw die and felt nothing. "Manage the pain. Reduce the inflammation. But I will not be immobilized. Adjust your treatment plan accordingly." The surgeon glanced at Kira as if she might intervene. She focused on suturing Nikolai's shoulder instead, her hands steady despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. The surgeon left, muttering about patient noncompliance and inevitable consequences. "You're going to destroy what's left of your mobility," Kira said quietly, tying off the final suture. "The surgeon is right. You need rest." "I need to be functional. Rest is a luxury for people who can afford vulnerability." He caught her wrist as she reached for the bandages, his grip gentle but firm. "You understand that now, don't you? After tonight. After Shaw."
She did.
God help her, she did. The past hours had crystallized something she'd been avoiding since the moment Nikolai's men had brought her to his compound. Safety wasn't found in isolation. Wasn't built through anonymity and careful distance from powerful men. Marcus Thornhill had found her anyway. Shaw had found her anyway. Her careful exile had protected nothing except her illusions. But Nikolai, dangerous, ruthless, absolutely unwilling to compromise, had walked on ruined legs into a warehouse full of trained killers because she'd chosen loyalty over survival. That meant something. Everything, maybe. "I'm staying," she said. Not a question. A statement. Nikolai's expression shifted, something almost vulnerable flickering across his features before control reasserted itself. "Because you're still afraid of Shaw's organization? They'll be dismantled within the week. His specialists gave us everything we needed under persuasion. You're safe now, Miss Doyle. Free to leave whenever." "I'm staying, because I want to." She met his eyes, willing him to understand. Not because of leverage or fear or lack of options. Because in the past weeks, I've felt more alive, more purposeful, more myself than I have in 18 months of hiding. Because Krisha trusts you absolutely, and dogs know things humans miss. Because you risked everything tonight for something that mattered more than strategic advantage. "You're romanticizing violence," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I killed Shaw. Shot him in cold blood while you watched. That doesn't trouble you? It should. Keira began wrapping his shoulder with practiced efficiency. But Shaw would have killed me without hesitation. Would have extracted that microchip from Krisha and disposed of him like garbage. You eliminated a threat. There's a difference between violence and cruelty, Mr. Makarov. You taught me that. Nikolai. The correction was soft. If you're staying, you should use my given name. She tested the weight of it on her tongue. Nikolai. His hand found hers again, fingers threading through hers with surprising gentleness for someone who'd killed a man hours before. There are things you should know about this life, about what staying means. I won't lie to you about the danger, the moral compromises, the reality that my world operates outside conventional ethics. I know enough. She thought about Marcus Thornhill, about justice that never came, about systems that protected predators while punishing victims. Your world isn't more corrupt than the legitimate one. It's just more honest about its corruption. He laughed, genuine and surprised. Spoken like someone who's been thoroughly disillusioned by proper society. Thoroughly educated, she corrected. There's a difference. The door opened, and Dmitri entered, his own shoulder heavily bandaged, carrying a tablet. The extraction team found Shaw's base. Files, communications, financial records. Everything you need to dismantle his network completely. He paused, eyes moving between them with careful assessment. Also, the data you promised Miss Doyle. On Marcus Thornhill. It's been compiled and verified by legal. Nikolai took the tablet, scrolled through pages of damning evidence with professional detachment. Then he handed it to Keira. Everything you need to destroy him, he said simply. Financial crimes, harassment complaints from 7 additional women, communications that prove deliberate conspiracy to ruin your career. My legal team can have him arrested within 48 hours. He'll die in prison, Miss Doyle. Broken, humiliated, stripped of everything he used as weapons against you.
Keira looked at the files.
Years of evidence. Proof that she'd been right all along. Vindication wrapped in legal documentation. She thought about the satisfaction she'd imagined, watching Thornhill fall, seeing him punished, claiming the victory that had consumed her thoughts during 18 months of exile. Then she set the tablet aside. Send it to the other women, she said. The ones he hurt worse than me. Let them decide what justice looks like. I don't need revenge anymore. I need. She trailed off, searching for words. Purpose, Nikolai finished.
Partnership.
Protection that doesn't demand you diminish yourself to deserve it. Yes. The admission felt like freedom. Dmitri cleared his throat diplomatically. I'll coordinate with the victims. Ensure they have resources and legal support. He left, closing the door with careful quiet. The medical wing settled into silence. Through the windows, dawn was breaking, gold and rose painting the sky beyond the compound's fortress walls. Nikolai shifted on the examination table, reaching for his crutches with visible effort. Keira moved to help him, and he allowed it without protest, acceptance that felt more intimate than touch. There's a position, he said as they walked slowly toward his private quarters. Formal role within the organization. Security consultant, specializing in behavioral analysis and threat assessment. Competitive salary, full benefits, and living quarters that don't require you to share space with a 140-pound dog. I like sharing space with Krisha. Then we'll accommodate. They reached his door, and he paused. This isn't charity, Keira. I need your skills. Your insights. Your ability to read people and situations with accuracy that rivals my best intelligence operatives. You're valuable. Genuinely valuable. She believed him. That was the shocking part. She actually believed that her worth wasn't contingent on making herself smaller, quieter, more palatable to powerful men. Nikolai valued her precisely because she'd refused to compromise, refused to let fear override principle. I accept, she said. But I want one thing added to the contract. Name it. Krisha stays with me.
Full-time.
Non-negotiable. Nikolai's smile was genuine warmth cutting through winter.
Done.
Though I suspect the beast would riot if separated from you at this point anyway. You've thoroughly corrupted his training. I've given him choices. There's a difference. Spoken like someone who understands loyalty isn't ownership. He opened the door, and Krisha padded through immediately, heading for the massive dog bed that had appeared in Nikolai's quarters at some point. The dog circled twice, then collapsed with a satisfied groan, apparently unconcerned that he'd nearly died 12 hours earlier. Resilience. Like his owner. Keira moved to the window, watching dawn paint the compound in shades of hope she hadn't felt in years. Behind her, she heard Nikolai settle into a chair with carefully controlled pain, positioning his crutches within easy reach. She turned. He was watching her with an expression she was learning to read, complex layers of possession and respect, desire and caution, the look of a man who'd learned that anything worth having was worth protecting absolutely. "What are you thinking?" she asked. That Shaw was wrong about many things, but correct about one. Nikolai's voice was soft, intimate. "You are significantly more dangerous than you realize. And I am profoundly grateful that danger is now directed with me rather than against me." Keira crossed to him, aware of the magnitude of this moment, the choice she was making, the life she was accepting, the future she was stepping into with eyes wide open. She leaned down, pressing her lips to his with deliberate intent. He responded immediately, his hand finding the back of her neck, pulling her closer with a kind of controlled intensity that characterized everything about him. When they broke apart, his eyes were dark with promise and possession. "Welcome home, Keira Doyle." She smiled. "I think you mean welcome to captivity. Is there a difference?" She looked around the luxurious quarters, thought about the compound's fortress walls, the dangerous world beyond them, the man who'd burned down his enemies to protect her. "No," she said honestly. "Not anymore." And for the first time since Marcus Thornhill had destroyed her life, Keira felt profoundly, dangerously, completely safe. Drop a comment below telling us your favorite moment. Was it Krisha's fierce protection, Nikolai abandoning his crutches to save Keira, or that final kiss sealing their fate? We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our next thrilling tale of love forged in fire.